Welcome to Two Dudes, One Movie Podcast, the podcast where two dudes dive into cinematic masterpieces from a different decade each week. From black and white classics to modern day blockbusters, we'll be covering it all. This season, we've been focusing on romantic comedies. And for our third episode of the season, we're discoing on up to the 70s. It's a film with a lot of heart, a dynamic sense of realism, and a disconnect from reality. It's the best picture from 1977. Rick, it's Annie Hall, directed and starring Woody Allen and Diane Keaton.
I watched the wrong movie from 1977, Park. I watched Star Wars.
Oh, no. Well, I can see where you can mistake Star Wars as a rom-com, especially with Luke and Leia.
That's true. There's a lot of calm in that one, isn't there?
Oh, very much so, Rick.
Well, Park, let's get in to this summary of our movie, shall we?
Oh, please.
So today, we are talking about the most influential movie to come out in 1977. This movie has spawned galaxies far, far away, and we now get movies with similar plot lines that get recycled as much as Nicholas Sparks novels. This movie is the birth of the Oscar darling, also known as a movie that involves a lot of social pandering that wins most of the awards at the most prestigious award ceremony that has about as clean of a track record as Woody Allen's dating history. This is Annie Hall.
Rick, every week I look so forward to your Rick recaps, and you never seem to disappoint.
Park, I try. There's a good 7 to 8 minutes that I really think. And then whatever comes out in those 7 to 8 minutes, we just put it on a paper.
Rick, the fact that you can do that in 7 to 8 minutes really makes me think, what could you do with 10 to 20 minutes?
It's true. Well, I will say that I usually write more and things that probably are a little more dicey, I would say. And then I have to scale back and delete some things.
Rick, one week I want you to just give us a full-on dice one. One that you really feel like has all the zingers to it.
Parker, I think we need to save that for our future Patreon.
Fair enough.
If we ever have one.
Of course we will, Rick. Hey, if you want to be part of our Patreon fam, let us know and we'll create one.
Yes, we'll do, $7 a month? That sounds right.
If you're one of our first 10 Patreons, we'll give it to you for $6.99.
Oh, what a deal.
What a deal.
In this economy, Park, shaving off a cent.
Rick, that's what we're all about here at Two Dudes, One Movie. We're here to make life easier for you.
So, Park, before we even dive into the movie, why did this movie win over Star Wars?
Rick, that is the question of the decade, one might say. I can't give you all of the answers here, but I will tell you, watching this movie, that this feels like the epitome of an Oscar movie. It feels like the epitome of a award season movie, just in its structure, its pacing, its innovation in ways for the genre, and its lack of appeal to large audiences.
That all hits the Oscar darling mold.
Especially lack of appeal, baby.
I know it's just lack of appeal, but I really think there has to be something pretentious about the movie, whether that's like the social commentary or in this movie's case, the main actor. Well, Park, it's time. I think it's time we dive into the movie. So let's get right into the good, bad, and the ugly. Park, let's start out with you. I feel like I have 2 words down for my notes for the good. You wrote a novel, so I think we should try to break apart your novel, then we can get into my 2 words.
Rick, there's not as much as appears on the notes page, but my goods, let's just jump into it. Number 1, the writing. This, in my opinion, is the best written film we've watched this season so far. It's incredibly clever in its comedy and how it uses all the various aspects of filmmaking to create jokes. In addition to that, the intentionality in its structure is phenomenal, even though it goes all over the place. It's kind of the opposite of what last week's movie did, where it was kind of meandering and all over the place, and that didn't necessarily feel like there was as much intentionality to where it was going. This goes throughout all of life. It goes throughout their lives, but at the end of each scene kind of feeds into the next sequence, into the next scene. So loved that. I thought that was probably the strongest part of the movie, the writing itself. Number 2, the realistic depiction of dating and love. Up to this point, there's kind of been an airiness around the rom-com, around the romanticness. It's kind of like a romantic novel. And this movie really brought us down to reality. And I think that's a trend for the 70s in general, really getting more gritty, getting more realistic in its depictions. This movie feels incredibly grounded in the midst of its heightened reality and fourth wall breaks. And I love the interwovenness of those two things and how one moment it feels so authentic and real, and then he steps out of a building and background artists are walking up to him, critiquing him about his dating life. And to me, that was really well done. It was really phenomenal. It's a smart film. And number 3, it's hyper aware of what it is and the messages and themes it's trying to convey on love and relationships, Rick.
It definitely is very aware of what it's trying to convey. I do think that whether those messages and themes are great or not, I guess we'll just discuss, Park. But Park, I have one thing written down here.
Rick, I cannot wait to hear your good. You've been teasing it all section now.
There's a lot of things that we can call iconic about this movie. I don't know a lot of early Hollywood. My assumption is this is one of the first big successes in a fourth wall break, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like this much at least, to this degree of like starting out the movie like that.
I can't think of another movie prior to this one.
Like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you have very close, or not very close, 9 years after this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's an 80s film. So I'm sure that this movie inspired a lot more fourth wall breaks.
And like I know there's a lot of fourth wall breaks, but I know like this one like starts out that way. I feel like Ferris Bueller's Day Off starts that way. I could be wrong. It's been a minute since I've watched that.
Yeah.
But like same with like Deadpool. These are just like typical famous ones I feel like I'm thinking about. Anyways, obviously it inspired a lot of that. It inspired the pretentiousness of Woody Allen. But the biggest thing has to be Diane Keaton's fashion. First of all, I started out thinking and just making fun of it. I was like, what is she wearing? It looks absolutely ridiculous. It obviously was the beginning of a lot of like style that I feel like plays on like a typical like 80s or 90s like man style of like always wearing like the suit and everything. She kind of like was always wearing like a tie and like always wearing a lot of things. I'm not a stylist by any means, so you can butcher. If I just butchered everything I just said, I did. But hey, I know fashion when I see it, Park, and it was there.
Rick, let me ask you this. Who has the better fashion in your opinion? Annie Hall from this movie or last week's movie, Holly in Breakfast at Tiffany's?
I think I need to go Annie Hall because there's a wide variety. Whereas I think Holly it always felt like she was just kind of getting dressed up for an event.
Yeah.
Which I guess in some ways she kind of was. But so I think there was a lot of wide variety.
I got to go with Holly's style. It's so chic, Rick.
So chic, Park.
I don't think I've ever used the word chic before in my life, but here we are, Rick.
I feel like one day we're going to have to bring someone on that actually knows about fashion.
Yeah, that would be...
I feel like so many of these early movies are so intent on fashion for the main actress.
That would have been a really great idea to have thought about at the start of this season, but...
That would, but...
Here we are.
Who else, when you stumble upon a TikTok of us or whatever, we're just rambling about fashion, like just, hey, we don't know it at all what we're talking about, but we see it.
I mean, that is our podcast, is it not? Not knowing anything that we're talking about, but talking about it anyways.
That's true. I feel like you know a little more than me. Mine, I feel like I take inspiration from the main character, where it kind of sounds like he's very pretentious and he sounds like he's always right about everything and like confident. That's where I feel like that's what I try to do in the podcast. I just kind of try to I think that I'm right, so we communicate it that way, you know?
Yeah. I try. I have such a passion for films in general, and then working in the film industry for the past 3 years has given me a little bit of knowledge of how everything runs and operates.
Well, I'm trying to think, Park, if I have any other goods. I feel like it's a weak good to just say DK's fashion. I guess not a weak good. It's a very important one. I agree with you, the writing. I think the writing was definitely very clever, very, very intentional. Honestly, Park, I think that's all I'm going to go with. But yeah, it's a smart film.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. You don't have to love everything about this film. Even if it's critically acclaimed, it's everyone's opinion and it's subjective at the end of the day.
It's true. I have screenshots that I'll read when we get to the bad and ugly. I dove into audience reviews on like the audience side of Rotten Tomatoes to find the funniest half stars.
But before we get to that, let's dive into our bad, and I'll start us off. How about that?
Let's do it.
So I've got a couple bads. My number one bad is something that was harked on a little bit earlier, is it's a rather dull film, and so it doesn't have that wide audience appeal. It's very, in my opinion, niche in its filmmaking and in its tone and style. And because of that, it wasn't my favorite. And that's not necessarily a bad for the movie itself. It's just a personal bad, if that makes sense. And then number two is it never grabs me and hooks me in. This, again, is more of a preference than a bad towards the film itself. But generally, if you go back to season 1 of our podcast, there was a lot of times where one of the goods that I share is the opening sequences of movies and how well they're done. And there's a reason for that, because films need to hook you. It's just like when you're reading an article or you're reading a book, the first chapter, the first paragraph, it's got to hook you. It's got to have a hook, line, and sinker to get you invested for the rest of the story. And unfortunately, it has the whole fourth wall interview kind of montage going on at the beginning, and it just doesn't hook me. So because of that, I think its weak opening leaves more to be desired. Not to say that there aren't funny aspects to it, but for me personally, it leaves more to be desired.
Park, if you were a 6th grade English teacher, how much base of like your score would you like rate on a student's attention grabber, the very first sentence? Like, does it have to be good to get an A? Is everything weighted by the attention grabber?
No, definitely not. But it's important. I think it's definitely important.
You just got to throw a good quote in there. That was always my move. You throw a good quote to start off the essay.
It's what Christopher Nolan does with his new movie Oppenheimer. It starts off with a quote.
That's actually a ton of movies.
It is.
Start off with a little quote at the very beginning.
I mean, that it's such a great way to get insight into the messages and themes of your movie.
Speaking on the quote, it sets the tone really quick. Like, it sets the tone of the opening scene.
Oh, for sure. There's no question about it that the quote at the beginning of Oppenheimer totally sets the tone of the film.
Parker, I only talk about Barbie right now, so don't bring up Oppenheimer to me. We're going to go right to my bats before we get to yours. This is a film class movie.
You're always honest about that.
Generally, I despise when movies are film class movies, and I want to talk about it again. This movie feels like this type of movie. When I was reading reviews about this movie, it's like a type of movie that people tell me that I have to like it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that like art, and of course, like, I think a movie is art. It's a form of art. I think that a lot of ways art should be subjective, and like, not everyone's gonna like a painting with a few dots on it that sells for $1 million, but maybe someone will. Or maybe it's just criminals that are getting tax write-offs. That's a whole other issue. But to me, this is exactly one of those movies that I just feel like I'm told, like, this is a good movie, you have to like it. You don't get to have your own opinion. Your opinion is that you like it.
I think that's the problem with the modern day and age in general, is people can't have opinions and understand that films and art is subjective. And I think there's two aspects to filmmaking. There's the do I enjoy this film, the subjective part, and then there's the objective filmmaking aspect of things. I think you can look at Annie Hall and say, objectively, from a filmmaking standpoint, this is a very strong film. It's innovative, it has a lot of witty dialogue, its structure is really well constructed, and its pacing is efficient. You can look at all those things objectively and say yes, 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 but that does not mean, from a subjective standpoint, you are going to personally enjoy this film, and that's okay. I think the fact that people don't like films, or if they don't like a film, that automatically makes it a bad film, I think is a poor argument. It's not your personal taste, it's not something that you like, but it doesn't mean it's a bad film. not all films are created with the general audience in mind.
It's true. This seems like it was created to win an Oscar.
Maybe it was, and that it did, Rick. It successfully completed its objective, if that was the case.
And I'll wrap around to a good of this movie is when you do look at Woody Allen's career as a director, this was the turning point. Like Woody Allen, I mean, I don't want to dive into all the things about him as a person. We know it's not good. Woody Allen as a director has a lot of incredible movies. He has some very, very Woody Allen movies. I don't think they were that good. I think that's more of just like average, but because it's Woody Allen, it gets tied to that. Cough, cough, Raining in New York. Is that the type of title of the movie? So I think that like this movie is such a growth movie that was like cool to see in like such a historic director's career. Like you can look back on this movie and look at his whole filmography, and like this was the movie that changed a lot of things for him in terms of like in terms of his art and like what he sees.
For sure.
Park, I know we got some uglies for this.
Rick, I've got two, and this first one I don't even know if this is really an ugly. It's actually, it probably should be a good because I thought this whole scene was hilarious. But Rick, kids into leather. Kids into leather. I don't know how I feel about that because that's insinuating some darker things. And I get what they're going for because that whole sequence of like, where I wonder...
It's a good scene.
It's a fantastic sequence, but it just, that last joke felt a little grimy to me. Maybe I'm just a terrible person for looking at it that way, but I feel like that's the way it was supposed to play off.
I think it is. So there's two scenes that I think that are honestly just the idea of having this kind of scene is just funny to me. And like that was one of them. And the other one was, I think they were at Diane Keaton's character's apartment for like the first time, and they were like having a conversation, then just subtitles were going over their conversation.
That was fantastic. And that goes back into
so funny.
Using every aspect of filmmaking where they're having this totally different conversation. Because a couple times throughout the film they use voiceover to internally say what they're thinking. But they didn't do that. They just used the written words on the bottom of the screen, the closed captions or the subtitles to show you what they're thinking in that moment. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious. I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
All I could think of was Everything Everywhere All at Once when they get turned into rocks.
Yes.
There's just those subtitles. That's the only thing I could think about.
I mean, that's probably the closest comparison to something I've seen. I've never seen something like that
How Much Your Mother
before.
pays a few homages to Annie Hall. How I Met Your Mother has a couple things like that. But yeah. My ugly, I go back and forth on it. Because I don't necessarily think she's like this the whole time, but maybe she is. I think Annie Hall as a character should be way more iconic than she's used in this movie. I think she's used as a plot device just to drive Alvy's character. And I honestly think that she should be more than that. I think her character is a lot deeper. I think her character actually has growth, which Alvy's character doesn't really have that much growth.
I don't know if I agree with you there. I mean, obviously, she comes into his life and he has some level of growth and understanding of relationships through that. But you just said it. She has a lot of depth to her character, and she has a lot of growth, way more growth than Alvy in this movie. So I don't know if I agree.
So I guess for me, she was the only thing that was like actually driving the plot. Even like the main character wasn't really doing a whole lot to drive the plot. It was just his desire of her.
So your critique is he was a passive protagonist
And pretentious. The three Ps. Pretentious, passive, protagonist.
I mean, there's definitely a lot to be said about passive protagonists. Everything I've read and learned about filmmaking and storytelling is you want an actionable protagonist, a character who makes a decision, whether it's the right or wrong decision, that pushes the story forward. You don't want him to be reactive to things going on. You want him to be making the decisions that causes something to occur.
And maybe this is more of a personal preference. That's why I don't necessarily know. I don't even know if I agree with myself anymore. I should be putting it as an ugly. I think it's something to be talked about. But that's that's a talking point.
Fair enough. Rick, I got one more ugly that I'm just going to say real quick. And I'm sorry, Woody Allen, I'm sorry to say this, but Diane is way out of your league. And to think that she's fawning over Woody Allen right after meeting him is just very unrealistic to me. Again, no offense to Woody Allen from back in the 70s. My very first note in my phone is, why does Woody Allen look just like me? So it's not like I'm barking up a tree here. I don't even know what the expression is, Rick, but...
It's not even that it was just her. I feel like every little story or every little thing, there was always a girl that was somehow coming on to him. So my first note was halfway through the movie was I feel like Woody Allen, like in the 70s, thinks he looks like Timothée Chalamet. I go Timothée Chalamet because Woody Allen likes Timothée Chalamet, so I think he...
Yeah,
I feel like he thinks he's him.
I feel like that's just a thing in films, is you've got the very average-looking dude that's always pulling the incredibly attractive woman. You see that all the time in, like, Adam Sandler movies as well. And it just, like... It's never worked for me, but for whatever reason, it really doesn't work for me at the start of this film. And I think part of it is the way Diane Keaton plays her first interaction with Alvy after playing tennis together, and she's just kind of like fumbling over her words, wanting to...
Yeah, she's like fawning over him.
Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't find that realistic at all. So that's an ugly for me, Rick.
I can see that because it's different if it was like a movie and they like really developed their relationship with a lot of his side pursuing her, and then like eventually she was like, oh, this is the guy I want to be with.
Yeah.
But no, immediately she was like, this guy's it.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't. But you know what? I can't tell you what everybody's taste is, so that's maybe that was right up her alley for the type of man that she goes for.
But all I'm saying, Park, is like, I feel like we're experts in being average looking, so like we can talk about this.
Oh, Rick, I was born to be average.
Born to be average.
Born to be average.
Well, with that, it's time to get to the then and now, Park.
Then and now. It's our new segment of the season. It's the segment where we talk about the differences and similarities to the genre from then to now.
You're up, because you actually wrote things for this.
Rick, I'm just going to dive into it. First and foremost, we've talked about this already, but this is an incredibly realistic depiction of relationships. The movies prior to this, I don't feel like did what this movie did. It's so much more open and transparent with the sex life of the characters and the ups and downs and the disconnects and the communication between each other. It felt very real and very candor that movies up to this decade don't really pursue or hit at that level. The 70s really feels like the dramatic swing from pure lightheartedness to gritty realism. And Annie Hall is, just comparing Breakfast at Tiffany's to Annie Hall is the perfect dichotomy of all you need to know about rom-coms of the 60s to rom-coms of the 70s. Continuing on, and this is something we also talked about a little bit earlier, is Diane Keaton's character, Annie Hall, feels like the most human, fleshed out female character in a rom-com we've seen up to this point. She's just as three-dimensional as Alvy. And while I'll say that Sabrina and Holly of the past 2 weeks definitely had dimensions to their characters, it's just at another level with Annie.
See, I feel Alvy is like 1 to 2 dimensional and she's actually 3-dimensional.
Yeah. But I just feel like in films up to this point, the female characters are always given the short stick in the situation.
It's like the same story.
Yeah,
almost.
It's the same story, it's the same cliches, and Annie just feels like a human. Like, she feels like a real human in this world.
She does. I even think a lot of that comes from some of the set designs and stuff. I mean, I have a little joke that I have right now that I'm drinking wine out of a glass that Alvy was drinking out of in one of their scenes, and I feel like you saw a lot of the growth of Annie, how like they go back to her apartment and all she has is one wine glass, so he just gives he gives him like a cup, and then like later in the movie you could tell that she's like actually like a lot more put together. She actually had like, I guess, a real arc behind the scenes.
The final point I'm going to make about then and now is our now comparison. And it's going to lead into, I think, more of what you're going to talk about. I felt like this movie has some strong comparisons to 500 Days of Summer in the way it's structured and maneuvers throughout a relationship in its entirety. And I can't help but think that 500 Days of Summer took a lot of inspiration from Annie Hall.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of comparison to the main characters. I think it actually brings up an interesting social commentary that, to me, both characters are pretty pretentious and decently unlikable in terms of, like, I don't think I'm going to want either of them to be a friend. My friend. Guess they could be a friend to someone. But I think that Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, people absolutely loved, to the point where, like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I think, has tweeted out or said in an interview before of, like, I don't know why you love this character. He's an asshole, kind of thing. He's actually a bad guy. Like, Summer actually is doing, like, Summer's a little crazy sometimes, just as he's a little crazy sometimes. But she's actually doing something, like, with her life and trying to figure out her life, where he thinks he already has life figured out, I guess, is a lot of it, right? I think the character build is similar to Alvy, but it's interesting that every single review I've ever read about anything online about this character says that, like, Alvy is, I guess, it's a pretentious and unlikable character. But then when you read reviews of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, it's like, oh, this character is amazing, he has everything right. So it makes me wonder, Park, that do you think that people like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character more just because he's a good-looking dude?
Oh, for sure. Attractiveness can get you away with so many things in life, and that's a hot take. I think there's going to be some angry folks in our comment section, but there's really no arguing it at the end of the day.
When you're a stud, Park, you can get away with a lot of things.
It's true, Rick. You would know.
I would not know, actually. Maybe back in my heyday, Park.
Oh, man.
We're going to move into a new segment, Thoughts with Rick. Usually it's rants, sometimes it's other things, or drink reviews we've had. Now this is where I pretend to have important thoughts, right? So I had 3 thoughts while watching this movie. One was 500 Days of Summer, we already talked about that. The second one, Park, and I feel bad about this one now because we've been dissing about Alvy's look this whole time. And one of my initial notes was, Alvy is just Parker if he grew up on the Upper East Side.
I can't believe we both have such similar notes. I hate the fact that both of us knew to compare Alvy to me.
I know.
Like, we both instinctively is like, why is that Parker? Why is that me?
Why is that Parker?
And we just got done talking for the last 5 minutes about how unlikable of a character he is. So what does that really say about me, ladies and gentlemen?
That's why, as we've been talking about during this podcast, I was like, oof, this little note's getting worse and worse.
We've been nothing but, like, condescending and rude and insulting to Alvy and Woody Allen throughout this entire podcast. And now we're both like, yeah, that's Parker.
Well, Park, my third point is Ted Mosby, is all I wrote down. I think it's a similar frame of mind where, like, well, one, Ted Mosby's favorite movie is this movie. Fun fact. There's, like, a whole scene of him, I think, that his worst nightmare about going on a date was going on a date with someone that thinks Annie Hall is average.
Rick, that's you.
There's, like, a little sequence about it. But anyways, I think him as a character is comparative to Alvy. I think the whole frame of How I Met Your Mother can be pretty comparative. I also think it's like, it plays in that funny mold of, like, Ted, an average-looking guy. I have no issue calling other guys average because I'm an average-looking guy. I feel like I know what average looks like. I see what it is. And it's just hilarious to me that, like, in How I Met Your Mother, Ted's getting any girl that he wants except for the one girl, Robin, but they're out the whole show. But every other girl, there's like girls fawning over him almost. That's at times, but it's just like all that stuff is funny to me. It's very like there's some things that are written pretty similarly. So it's just I don't know. It's a funny little aspect, I guess, of Hollywood.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the caricature, you know. It's the suave womanizer that is overtly pretentious and shouldn't have women fawning over him because he's kind of a jerk and douchey, but it's just how it goes.
That's how it goes. Because that's Hollywood, Park. It's full of douches.
Can't argue with you there, Rick.
That's why you gotta live in the real movie-making city of Atlanta, right, Park?
Oh, yeah. Well, the cold hard reality is all those douches from Hollywood just fly to Atlanta to make their movies now.
They probably don't even stay in Atlanta.
They don't. They come for their 2 months to film their movie, and then they go back to their pretentious LA lives.
That's what it's all about, Park.
That is the Hollywood system, baby.
That they all live off of goop out there.
Yes, they do. Gotta love that goop, Rick.
Gotta love that goop.
We'll have to dedicate an entire podcast to goop.
To goop in Hollywood.
To discovering the mysteries of goop.
I think we got some questions to get through.
We do, Rick, and I'm going to let you introduce this first question.
Okay, Park. So I think I want to reframe this question a little bit than how we wrote it down.
Reframe away.
So the question is, what celebrity do you want you to strangle you in your dreams? This is inspired off of one of my favorite quotes in this movie. That was Annie saying, I had a dream last night where Frank Sinatra strangled me. That's just like, I don't know why. It came out of nowhere. I think that's one of the greatest lines I've ever heard of any movie. If I ever made a movie, Park, my opening quote is going to be that.
Rick, that's a hook, line, and sinker right there.
No matter what my movie is. It could be a horror movie. No matter what the movie's about.
Opens up to someone sitting on a couch talking, mid-conversation. I want to be strangled by Frank Sinatra in my dreams.
It's the first line of dialogue. I'll make a silent film, but that'll be the only dialogue.
You know, they say that opening images and opening lines of dialogue give insight into the film itself, and I guess that would give insight into your film, Rick.
That's true. I think it would. Well, I'm going to put that in my pocket for another day when I make a movie, Park.
Rick, you looking to make a movie anytime soon?
I'm never looking to make a movie, Park, but...
Maybe I'll put it in my notes then. Just save it for later. I'll give you credit. I'll give you credit for taking it from Annie Hall.
Just slip it somewhere. Even just slip the quote somewhere in your credits.
It could be an opening quote line. It doesn't even have to be dialogue. It can be a quote on a black screen.
That's true. That's all it has to be.
It could be that, and I could put Rick the Third, and then under that I could put Annie Hall. It's like The Office, though, when you miss all the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. It could be one of those.
So I need you to tell me, what celebrity do you want to strangle you in your dreams pre-1980s?
Pre-1980s?
Pre-1980s. So I guess it could be someone that's like in the 1980s, but they had to have like done something pre-1980s.
Oh, Rick, you just really ruined my answer there. I thought this was modern. I could choose anything. It's modern day now.
We'll do one of each. Let's start off pre-80s.
Okay, pre-80s. Fictional character, or does that have to be a real life person?
I do either. I do anything.
Okay. King Kong.
King Kong.
Go fast. They'd strangle me real quick.
I'm going to go Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr. Oh my gosh, Rick. I was just listening to the Hamilton soundtrack today.
I want to have in my dreams, I wake up in my dream, of course. It's like Inception, you like wake up a few times. And I see a figure with a powdery white wig in the corner of my room. And then they sprint over to me with like a tune from Hamilton and just choke me, and then I actually wake up. Park, give me your current character that you
Tim
want
Tebow.
or current person.
Tim Tebow.
Tim That's a genius answer. I would have never guessed something like that in a million years.
Yep, it just fell upon me, Rick. I was like, this is who needs to choke me out in my dreams.
I would go with current. So they have to be alive. I would go with... I think he's still alive. I'm going to go with Jimmy Carter in his current state of like 95 years old.
That's a great answer, Rick. He's
like I want the scenario is I know that Jimmy Carter regularly leads Sunday school class.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, we are filming this podcast obviously in July of 2023. By the time this podcast comes out, there is a very high likelihood that Jimmy Carter might not be with us still. So just put it back in context of July 2023.
Actually, I'm going to reframe my story, I guess, of what I want it to be.
Okay.
Have you ever been? I think it's in Georgia Park. You could drive to it anytime you want. Have you been to the Jimmy Carter Peanut?
Yes, Rick. We've been together.
Oh, we were there together. We were all on that trip.
Yeah, we were all on that.
I want to be strangled by Jimmy Carter in front of the Jimmy Carter Peanut.
I like that, Rick. Seems like a nice
Or maybe
dream.
strangled by the Jimmy Carter peanut. A lot of different things you could do here.
Rick, I think I would be okay with either of those for you.
Yeah, I think so too. I remember on that trip we saw a random dog.
Yeah, we did. It was just hanging out by the peanut. Anyways, Rick, I got another question for you.
Give it to me.
What's the craziest thing you have seen people watching? So obviously in this movie there's a sequence when they're out on a date and they're just people watching in the park. And Rick, I'm just curious, what have you seen that's crazy in the people watching world?
Park, this is a tough one. I did not actually think about this prior, so I'm going to have you go first, and then maybe I'll be able to think of my answer.
All right. Mine goes back to my college days. It was after a Florida football game because you and I both went to the University of Florida, go Gators. And we're across the street at our little midtown area, and it was there's a church right next to the midtown area with a little lawn to its side, and there was a man who was throwing up and peeing at the same time, Rick.
Was everything like kind of hanging out, or was he?
Oh, Rick,
floating?
for sure. Right in the church lawn, just everything hanging out. It was something else. It was one of those things where you don't want to look at it, but you can't not look at it.
In the spirit of nudity, my story is also about a nudist too.
Ah, Rick.
This was not that long ago. We were driving in Asheville, which I may or may not live in, and like walking on like one of the ramps to get on the highway was this woman that definitely not a day under 70. She was older. Zero clothes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very
That's
interesting.
all I have to say there.
That's all you need to say, Rick.
I assume, like, honestly, she was probably on some drug. That's what it looked like, at least. But
Aren't we all, Rick?
Aren't we all on some drug, Park? I'm on that drug called life. No, I mean, I
that's
guess I'm on
what I
alcohol
was
right now.
gonna say. Oh, you took it from me.
Well, I guess I'm drinking alcohol right now, so you can have that one.
Okay, cool. Because I'm not drinking alcohol. I don't drink on the job, Rick.
I can't do this job without
Not
drinking.
Fair enough. I guess
I'm
that's
just kidding. I'm probably 50-50. No, maybe 30% of our podcast I might be drinking something. Not as much as it should be, I feel like.
That's fair, Rick. Maybe we'll have a specific podcast where we just drink together.
Sure. That's it. We drink and talk about the Oscars.
That should be our podcast. That should be our specialty podcast.
Like, there should be no notes at all. It's just us ranting about something.
I love it, Rick.
Okay, Park, we got one more question.
All right, Rick. And
you're about to read that, Park. I'm reading it.
I know. I just want to preface, this is dicey. I feel like this whole section, all these questions have led to dicey answers, but this is a dicey question, Rick.
Actually, you wrote this question. You get full credit. You can read it.
Okay. Rick, does Annie Hall reinforce the idea or start the idea that women are terrible drivers?
I actually really do wonder if it had something to do with starting the stereotype. It's a very interesting thought.
Yeah. I mean, very clearly they set Annie Hall up to be a horrendous driver.
It was the first thing that Woody Allen's character learns about her, pretty much.
Yeah.
Is that
Pretty much.
It definitely like reinforces that stereotype. I really wonder if it kind of starts it though.
Yeah, I don't know where it starts or where it originates from.
To be fair, every single person with a New York license plate is an absolutely awful driver. It just so happens that the one time we saw, I think the one time in this movie, or the first time in this movie that we saw someone like physically driving, there was like a scene of them driving. It was a woman.
And you know, it goes both ways. Alvy Singer gets into like 4 fender benders in Los Angeles.
That's true.
When he's driving. So,
and he's a New Yorker. That's what I'm learning.
So maybe it's not reinforcing the idea that women are awful drivers. Maybe this movie is reinforcing the idea that New Yorkers are awful drivers.
And that's not even a stereotype. I think it's proof.
That's real life, cold hard facts.
We grew up in South Florida, where it is New York City, pretty much.
Yeah, every October to March is New York City 2.0.
Your chances of a car accident just increase 20%.
Exponentially. Like every week on this podcast, we try and have a fun activity planned for you guys. And this week, again, is no exception. We're not doing an AI script reading. We're not doing improv like last week. No, Rick? We're going back to our roots here. We're doing a quiz. But this is not just any quiz, Rick. This is probably the most important quiz we've ever done. It's how dateable are you actually?
Park, I'm glad that we're both married, because after this quiz comes out, I don't know what would have happened before.
I know. If I found out how dateable I was before I got married, I don't know if I'd ever be able to date again. We're putting this obviously through the context of if we had to go back into the dating world again, because both of us are happily married.
With dogs, so.
With dogs, so we're pretty much locked in now.
We are locked in. It was not locked in the day of our marriage.
No.
Well, when a dog you had the dog. For me,
I had the dog beforehand. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right, Rick. Why don't we just jump into this little?
Yeah, Park. Let's just jump right in.
All right. I'll read the question so everyone at home can follow along. And if you want to play this quiz with us, it's just the BuzzFeed quiz. Just Google "How dateable are you?" BuzzFeed, and you're gonna find it. It's gonna be the top search result. So, Rick, let's do this. Who should pay at the end of a date? I always do. I expect my date to. I expect my date to at least the first few times. It should always be 50-50. Each person should pay for what they got. It should be reflective of individuals' incomes. I always offer to pay whichever way they like, but I'd hope that my date would pay. The person that did the asking out should pay. Rick, this is easy for me. I personally always pay on the first date.
I always pay, but there's a little asterisk. I think that the person asking out should pay. But so that being said...
That's what you should put then, if that's what you think. Put what you think. Yeah. Don't put what you would do.
I know. I just wish I guess my perfect answer is I think at the start I would always pay. And then, like, the more you go, the person that kind of plans maybe, I don't know. This is a tough one, Park.
It is. Well, it's only going to get tougher, Rick.
I'll do the person that's asking out. I'll roll with that.
All right. I like it. We have different answers now. All right, question 2. How would you feel dating someone far more successful than you? I'd be incredibly proud. I would feel proud, but secretly just a tiny bit insecure, though I would never tell them or make them feel bad about it. I would hate that. I'd want to feel on par with my partner. I would hate that. I want to feel like the main provider. I wouldn't care.
Incredibly proud.
You'd be incredibly proud?
Oh, without a doubt.
Well, that's great, Rick. This is shallow of me. This is very misogynistic, maybe even one would say. But I would feel proud, but secretly just be a tiny bit insecure.
Your partner wants you to go with them to an event you really, really don't want to go. What do? I say that I don't want to go, and I don't. I say that I don't want to go, but I do anyways because it's so important to them. I'm sorry, that first one threw me off. I hope no one selects that. I voice my opinion and I do go, but I expect something in return. I go and do my best to enjoy myself. I doubt there would be something I wouldn't want to go to.
I think I would pick I go and do my best to enjoy myself.
I definitely, if there's something I don't want to do or don't want to go, I would voice it. But, of course, if something's important to my wife, I'm going to go. And I'm going to try to enjoy myself, I guess. So I'll put that one.
It's your partner's birthday in a week, and you have no idea what to get them. What do? That would never happen. I'm fantastic at both gift giving and planning. I would ask a close friend or family member of theirs what to get them. I would go to a store and ask the sales assistant what I should get them. Never ask a sales assistant. That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
I would just buy them the most expensive thing I can. I would take them out somewhere or plan an event. I would get them a gift card. If I'm being really, truly honest with myself, I probably wouldn't remember until it's too late. That's an honest opinion right there.
I wouldn't forget. I'm not even great at planning.
Rick,
I'm average at gift giving, but I'm not going to forget.
I would get Becky a gift card, no question about it.
It's very Alvy of you, Park.
No, I would take them out somewhere, plan an event. Becky and I are very much experienced people over material things, and so planning an event or going out somewhere would easily be what we would do.
Yeah, we do the same way. We do like a trip or something that I feel like requires planning, or like an experience generally requires planning.
Yeah.
Your partner has cooked you dinner. What do? Eat it, obviously. Eat it and make an effort to genuinely thank them. Eat it, thank them, and do the dishes. I probably wouldn't eat it because they're an awful cook. I'd do the dinner dishes nightly since I...
Yeah, that's what I do, Rick. I eat it and then I do the dishes. Because if I was to cook, then no one would eat anything.
It's accurate. If you had to choose one thing, what's the most important quality in a partner? Emotional support, good prospects, interesting conversation, good looks, a devotion to me.
Good looks, Rick. No question about it.
You get the further you go down, I feel like it just gets shallower, especially this
a devotion to me.
Devotion to me. What's his face in the movie in Breakfast at Tiffany's just wants that. I guess he wants both of those things. Those are only two things he cares about.
Yeah, I think the most important would be emotional support.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Would you ever snoop through your partner's phone? Yes, if I got the chance. Yes, but only if I thought they were cheating. Maybe if I had my suspicions, but I would never specifically seek the opportunity to do so. No, even if I thought they may be unfaithful.
I don't believe in that, so I wouldn't.
Okay. I think I'm going to go with no, even if I thought they may be unfaithful. But if I thought they may be unfaithful, I'd probably just, ask them about it. And if I still didn't feel well about it, then we would probably just break up. That's how I would probably handle that situation. Rick, I have my results.
Give it to me, Park.
Rick, I am 87% dateable.
87, Park? That's a B.
87%. It says you're a bloody catch. You're considerate and kind, making you a wonderful person to date. Your partner is lucky to have you. You hear that, producer Becky? And if you're not with anyone, don't worry. It's just a matter of time. Just make sure to date someone that gives you just as much respect and consideration as you give them.
Park, I'm 90% dateable. I got the same exact description that you did, which makes me upset at the person that wrote this.
Rick, wow.
I expect a different paragraph for each percent.
For each percent. That would be a lot of work.
That would be so much work.
Hey, Rick, at the end of the day, we're both bloody catches, and I can't say I'm surprised by that.
Both bloody catches.
We're at the end of our episode, and like at the end of every episode, we discuss our rating system. And in this season, we're not doing just a typical pass and recommend, but we have the ROM and the COM scale. We're going to rate the romantic aspect of the movie 1 out of 5, and then we're going to rate the comedic aspect of the movie 1 out of 5. If it gets a 5 or higher, that means we recommend, or a 4 or lower, and that's a pass, Rick. 5 can kind of be that middle ground area, but... So, Rick, I'm going to let you start off. Where do you rate the ROM of this movie?
It's a little tough. I feel like when I go back and think about it, I really don't think there was that much. I think this was just the Woody Allen show. So I'll go with... I'll give it a 2. I'll do the ROM 2. There obviously was some ROM there. Diane Keaton carried that, though. The COM, I'm going to give a 3 because there's a lot of comedic elements, and maybe I should be alive in 1977. I would have liked it more. I don't really know. A lot of things didn't hit with me. I feel like there's a lot of swings and misses or things I just didn't really laugh at.
That's fair.
So I'm gonna give it a 5, which I know is right on that line, which is so weird because I feel like all of our movies are right on that line for me right now.
It has.
Which I would still say I would still recommend. I'd recommend. So 5 and recommend mainly because they do a lot of groundbreaking stuff in this realm in this movie, and whether you like Woody Allen or not, whether you like his movies or not, it's a cool movie to see.
For sure. I am going to give the ROM of this movie a 2. I want to state that I feel like this is an incredibly accurate depiction of relationships. and how things don't always run and operate super smoothly. Relationships have its ups and downs and goes in all different directions, and I thought that that's an incredible depiction on film, but the rom part of it was weak, so 2. And I'm also going to give the com aspect of it a 2 as well. I think incredibly witty, incredibly well-written script and story, but I didn't laugh at all during this movie. I think there were like 2 parts that I was really into, which was the children sequence towards the very beginning, and then the subtitles to show you what their internal monologue was. And that was kind of it. And because of that, I have to give it a 2 on the com scale, unfortunately.
Yeah,
which
Mark,
means
I
it's
was
a
so
4.
much more generous than you on the com
I
scale.
know, which means it's a 4 out of 10, which by that score means I should pass on it. But I feel like the overall product is bigger than the sums of its parts, so I'd rate it a 6 out of 10 realistically, Rick, and I would still recommend it.
Oh, Park, I feel like we gotta bleep that rating. You cannot question the perfect system that is the ROM or the com scale, Park.
All right, Rick, 4 out of 10, pass.
Oh, I'm just messing. Not really, though, because we did invent the perfect scale.
It is perfect. Well, I don't know why I'm questioning it.
I know. That's going to be hard for me to come on next week, Park.
Next week, we're moving into the 1980s, which means we have a 1980s film that we're watching. What film is that?
So I think this is the greatest benchmark movie in terms of a rom-com. I think that all rom-coms, you got to put them up against this movie to see if it's a good movie or not. This is When Harry Met Sally, Park.
Rick, I don't think there was any other rom-com that we could have chosen from the 1980s.
It had to be this. There's obviously rom-coms in the 80s, but this is the rom-com.
To a lot of people, it's considered the greatest rom-com of all time.
A decent amount of people even have this in their top 20 to 30 movies. So When Harry Met Sally carries weight.
I'm excited to watch this. It's been a couple years since I've seen it. It'll be great to discuss it because last time I watched it, I remember there was a lot of really great aspects to this film.
I watched this not even 3 months ago, but we're going to go back at it.
Oh boy, Rick. That's sometimes a great thing to do when it hasn't been that long and you rewatch something and you kind of have that fresh perspective on it still.
Yeah, you can pay attention to different things.
For sure.
Cool.
And I love when you pay attention to other things, Rick. You always come up with something great.
Park, that's what I try to do. So good things happen when I pay attention. It doesn't happen much, I know. But when I pay attention, Park.
I'm expecting it for next week.
Get ready.
You've been listening to Two Dudes, One Movie Podcast. The podcast where two dudes dive into cinematic masterpieces from a different decade each week. From black and white classics to modern day blockbusters, we'll be covering it all. I've been Parker. You've been Rick. That's going to just about do it for us this week. So until next one, we'll see you then.
I hope everyone sees Frank Sinatra in your dreams. Good night.
Two Dudes, One Movie is an independently created podcast.
Like, rate, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen.
You can find the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also find us on YouTube, where we will post full video recordings of each episode.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Two Dudes, One Movie Podcast.
Thanks for watching.